What's going on with UKIP? After a scathing attack on Nigel Farage from one of the party's own MEPs, now a senior UKIP source is calling for Mr Farage to face a leadership contest to prevent a tragedy of self-destruction. Dramatic words, strong words. Mr Farage is still in the job only because the UKIP leadership board refused to accept his resignation following his failure to win the South Thanet seat and become an MP, just hours after he appeared on our programme on Monday morning and said he was enjoying the downtime. And Nigel Farage, who was the leader of UKIP until he stood down on Friday, and I still can't get used to saying those words. Are you used to it yet?
I'm enjoying life far more than I was before, thank you.
OK, all right. Our political guru, Norman Smith, is here. OK, let's start with UKIP sources in the last few minutes saying UKIP really does need a leadership contest after all.
Yeah, Vic, extraordinary. What is going on basically is a civil war is erupting in UKIP around the leadership of Nigel Farage. I just had a conversation with a very senior figure in UKIP who was in no doubt whatsoever there needed to be a leadership contest. It was simply not tenable, this person said, for Nigel Farage to remain as leader without a contest, given the party's disastrous performance at the general election, where, yes, they got 4 million votes, but they only got one MP, and Nigel Farage himself did not get elected. This person said, look, it would be the equivalent of the Liberal Democrats saying, OK, let's keep Nick Clegg. It's all fine. We don't need to have a leadership contest. We can just carry on. So this big figure is demanding a leadership contest, and the argument is if Nigel Farage does not voluntarily decide to trigger a contest, then there will be moves to force one. Now, you may remember beginning of the week, Monday, we heard from UKIP's National Executive Committee, where Nigel Farage went along to it, and he said, we were told, he said, I want to resign, at which they all protested and said, no, 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 you mustn't resign, we all love you. He then said, oh, OK, I'll stay. I am told that is not what happened. I'm told that, in point of fact, Suzanne Evans, one of the senior UKIP MEPs, was asked by Mr Farage to sign a bit of paper saying she herself would stand as a sort of interim leader but had no intentions of standing as leader. In other words, she would simply keep the leadership seat warm for Mr Farage over the summer, and then he would then reclaim his position later in the autumn. She refused to sign that bit of paper, at which point Nigel Farage basically intimidated, I'm told, the National Executive Committee, and they went along with him and decided to reinstall him as leader. It is a very, very ugly situation. And my sense is that we are entering a period where UKIP is potentially on the cusp of imploding unless they have this leadership contest, because it does all seem to hinge on that decision in the wake of the election by Mr Farage originally to go and then not to go. Let me just remind you of what he actually said. Take a look at this.
I don't break my word, so I should be writing to the UKIP National Executive in a few minutes saying that I am standing down as leader of UKIP.
For the tape, can you introduce yourself?
Nigel Farage, leader of UKIP.
So you are leader of UKIP?
Yeah.
Wow, OK. So do they have... I mean, you say there are moves now to force a leadership contest. How would that work?
You know, this figure I was talking to kind of was in despair in that there doesn't seem to be an obvious mechanism to force a leadership contest, because apparently the only body that can trigger a leadership contest is the National Executive Committee, which this source said Nigel Farage had got in his back pocket. It is not just, though, let me just say this, it's not just an attempt to get Nigel Farage to face a leadership contest, it is also to clear out those around him, many of his advisers who are being blamed for the disastrous election campaign and the presentation of Nigel Farage as bluntly Mr. Angry, and kind of the profound sort of loss of any sense of humour from Mr Farage. You may remember he complained to the police about a joke on Have I Got News for You about his conduct. And also remember, during those leadership debates, we were told it was a sort of shock and awful strategy. He deliberately went out of his way to almost antagonise, to ruffle feathers. You remember he kind of challenged the audience and accused them of being biased. And there were also those very, very controversial remarks about HIV and immigrants. Just take a look at those.
There are 7,000 diagnoses in this country every year for people who are HIV positive, which is not a good place for any of them to be, I know. But 60% of them are not British nationals. You can come into Britain from anywhere in the world and get diagnosed with HIV and get the retroviral drugs that cost up to £25,000 per year per patient. I know there are some horrible things happening in many parts of the world, but what we need to do is to put the National Health Service there for British people and families who in many cases have paid into this system for decades.
Thank you. Leanne Wood.
This kind of scaremongering rhetoric is dangerous.
It's a fact.
It's dangerous, it divides communities
true.
and it creates stigma to people who are ill, and I think you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Well, I'm sorry, we've got to put our own people first.
That was one of the TV debates several weeks ago now. Let me ask you also, Norman, about the comments from their economic spokesman, UKIP's economic spokesman, MEP Patrick O'Flynn, telling The Times this morning that Mr Farage risked turning the party into a personality cult and some other more derogatory comments as well.
Yeah, I mean, this has been one of the long-running criticisms of Nigel Farage and UKIP, that basically he runs it as his personal fiefdom, that it is in effect a one-man show. Patrick O'Flynn, the economic spokesman, has now broken cover. The source I was speaking to said to me, quotes, "Patrick is not alone," which I think gives you a sense that there is a gathering of other figures in UKIP who are determined that either Mr Farage puts himself up for election or they will try and engineer an election. Now, one scenario might be is they could try and get some sort of public statement together voicing unhappiness with Mr Farage. But Patrick O'Flynn, in his article, is pretty clear that during the election campaign, Nigel Farage was an entirely different man. I kind of put it down to the fact that he had a dodgy back and was maybe really suffering from, you know, some real back pain, which meant he just lost all his mojo, frankly. He became irritable. He was just a very different man. Patrick O'Flynn says that he was presented snarling, thin-skinned and aggressive, and he questioned where the cheerful, ebullient, cheeky, daring politician had gone, and he posed the question, was UKIP turning into, quotes, an absolutist monarchy or a personality cult? And that is what it is all about. It is all about Nigel Farage, the way he runs UKIP, and whether he can continue and has the legitimacy to continue given the disastrous election they have, and his decision basically to offer to resign and then to come back. A decision which he says was by public acclamation, but from the source I've been speaking to was always his game plan. In other words, he had no intention of going. He was going to do a Putin in effect, offer to go and then come back. But be in no doubt, UKIP are at the centre of an absolutely critical storm which could yet potentially fatally undermine the party's standing.
And just one final thought in terms of the running of UKIP. I'm not clear who's won this battle. Douglas Carswell, their only MP, he was successful a week ago, didn't want to take the taxpayers' money that's owed to the party as a result of winning that seat. Mr Farage apparently wanted to take it all. It's called short money after a particular former MP. Who's won that?
That is still ongoing, although it's pretty clear that Douglas Carswell is absolutely not going to accept this £650,000. He thinks it would be utterly absurd for one MP to claim £650,000. He thinks it is contrary to the whole spirit of UKIP. And in a way, that argument too underlines the tensions, the civil war now brewing within the party, because Mr Carswell was himself subject to some pretty aggressive briefing by figures around Nigel Farage, suggesting that it wasn't up to Douglas Carswell what happened to this money. The money was the result of 4 million people voting for UKIP. It wasn't Mr Carswell's money. You sense there is a real and significant gulf chasm that has opened up within UKIP, and I wonder whether they can actually put it back together. I mean, one scenario is Nigel Farage has some sort of Damascene conversion and says, OK, I hear what you're saying, I'm going to get rid of all my advisors, many of whom are kind of deemed to have picked up their tactics and their conduct from the American school of politics, the much more sort of abrasive, in-your-face, aggressive briefing that you get in American politics. Could Nigel Farage wave goodbye to them, put himself up for re-election? Would that be enough to calm the party down? I'm not sure it would. I think things have probably gone too far. So I suspect one way or another we are heading for a leadership contest, whether with the acquiescence of Nigel Farage or whether it's actually forced on him.
Thank you, Norman. We have, of course, try to get Mr Farage on the programme, and also Patrick O'Flynn, the MEP, the UKIP MEP, who made those comments about Mr Farage in the Times this morning. A couple of messages from you. This from one viewer on WhatsApp. Nigel Farage has committed a serious error of judgment in this plainly staged pseudo-resignation. UKIP was presented with an opportunity to prove that it is not just a one-man band. Instead, it's showing itself to be dishonest and incapable of finding another suitable leader. Derek on email, Nigel Farage is the UKIP party, not afraid of telling the truth, unlike those who are jealous of his success. Kelly on Twitter says, I agree. If UKIP want to move forward, they really do need a leadership contest. Coquelin on Twitter, Farage and his latest antics. Yet another example of the plainly deceitful nature of this party and its leaders. And Nigel has emailed victoria@bbc.co.uk. UKIP's success has much to do with the efforts of Nigel Farage. He is the Churchill of UKIP. We'll get more reaction to those calls for a leadership contest, which a source has said to Norman Smith. More reaction to come throughout the programme.